everyone. Welcome to Cypress Christian Church. Please join me in the call to worship. The Lord God is compassionate, and this compassion is extended to
all the world and all those who live in the world.
The Lord God demonstrates this compassion, a compassion made real for
all the world and all those who live in the world.
The Lord God revealed this compassion in Jesus Christ, a compassion shared for the sake of
all the world and all those who live in the world.
The Lord is compassionate.
And we give thanks to God for his sake.
Let us worship. Please join us in the opening hymn, A Mighty Fortress is Our God. Allow for us to recognize the compassion through which you revealed your love for all of humanity. Allow us to see in Jesus the ache you felt for humanity and the depths you are willing to traverse for our sake. May our gratitude be reflected in our praise of you this day. It is through the great mercy of Jesus that we offer our prayer today. Amen.
Clearly, you all have already started that good work, whether it is through our music or our times of prayer. We have already started the good work of rejoicing, of giving thanks to our God. I want to say welcome, extended welcome to any guests or visitors who are with us this morning. Cypress Creek Christian Church is a community that continues to strive to put love first in all things. We see that as our vision and our mission. We draw it from 1 John 4, where we read those words that we are to love one another because God first loved us. I do want to remind all of you about those blue cards that you find in your worship guides. Please take a moment to fill those out. Let us know that you're here. You have an opportunity to place them in the offering baskets later. Unless you're thinking about joining, then we say keep a hold of it and give it to me or one of our elders at the close of the service. Also, let us know on that blue card how we can pray for you this coming week. Well, today is the day of the annual chili cook-off. You maybe already could smell as you walked in that it was the chili cook-off day. A great way of just having fun, coming together as a community, but also raising some money for mission and outreach. I hope you'll plan to participate after the 11 o'clock service this morning, to share in that. It's just a lot of fun. So I hope to see you there. I do want to lift up that the new church website is up and going. Looks great, though if you happen to see a little something that needs to be changed, maybe the editor's eyes did not notice it, please let us know. I also want to lift up that tomorrow, and then the last Monday of every month, is Gringo Spirit Day. And Gringos is going to give 20% of whatever you spend back to Cypress Creek. So I hope to see you there tomorrow at some point. You can let friends know, invite them. You either have to bring in the little certificates, we've got some around, or just tell your server this is for Cypress Creek's Spirit Day. And up to $500, we will be able to do that. And then I want to lift up, this Wednesday we do not have adult studies, but the following Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. And the chapel will be open both in the morning and the afternoon for those who would like to come by and receive the marked ashes. And then in the evening at 6:45, right here in this space, we will have a service of worship. So I hope that you will come and participate in that wonderful experience as we transition into the season of Lent. That time that we set aside to make ourselves ready for Holy Week and Easter Sunday. Well, today we continue looking at the resume of Jesus, looking at his life and what his life tells us, what it teaches us, what it invites us to do. Today I'm in the 7th chapter, and I invite you to hear these words. A little later, Jesus went to a city called Nain. His disciples and a great crowd traveled with him. As he approached the city gate, a dead man was being carried out. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow. A large crowd from the city was with her. When he saw her, the Lord had compassion for her and said, "Don't cry." Jesus stepped forward and touched the stretcher on which the dead man was being carried. Those carrying him stood still. Jesus then said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Awestruck, everyone praised God. "A great prophet has appeared among us," they said. "God has come to help his people." This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding region. My translation said Jesus had compassion. Some say Jesus was moved with compassion. Maybe it's both. For someone who has compassion is usually moved with compassion. I want you to watch a short video clip that I think shows someone who was literally moved with compassion.
You do your very best now, Forrest. I sure will, Mama.
I remember the bus ride on the first day of school very well.
Are you going along? Mama said not to be taking rides from strangers. This is the first school. I'm Forrest Gump. I'm Dorothy Harris. Well, now we ain't strangers anymore. Can't sit here.
You know, it's funny what a young man recollects, because I don't remember being born. I don't recall what I got for my first Christmas. I don't know when I went on my first outdoor picnic, but I do remember the first time I heard the sweetest voice in the wide world.
You can sit here if you want.
I had never seen anything so beautiful in my life. She was like an angel.
Well, you're going to sit down, aren't you?
Literally moved a foot or so with compassion. Compassion, in my opinion, is given a lot of lip service, but is rarely championed as a powerful tool in our day-to-day lives. In fact, pity is substituted for compassion because pity doesn't require much energy, doesn't require much time. Pity is the go-to expression that resembles compassion without all that exhausting angst and ache and the emptying of self that compassion requires. The word pity comes from the Latin. It's where we also get our English words like piety and pious. A dutiful kindness, shall we say, a polite pleasantry, like the response that you give to your friend Frank when he says, I wasn't able to go to the movies last night. I had this really bad headache. And we say, oh, what a pity. What a pity. It sounds good, but really doesn't require much, does it? It passes the good manners test without any obligation or commitment. Beyond some maybe big cow eyes of concern or maybe a little bit of a quivering lip, we're able to return to our own little worlds without really being affected by the issues of another person. Jesus, on the other hand, was splunk-netofied. I know you're looking at me a little weird right now. Actually, the Greek word that Luke uses here, that we translate as compassion, when Jesus saw the woman he had or was moved with compassion, the word there in the Greek is splunk-mizomai. I love that word. It literally means to eat the entrails or to gnaw on the intestines. Earthy, I know, yet it reveals something interesting. Pity leaves an easy escape route, shall we say, so we don't have to actually interact or give of ourselves. It's that moment, though, when compassion comes about. I mean, the compassion that Jesus knew, the compassion that he felt that couldn't be forgotten or dismissed. It's that moment when we see the pain or the suffering or the hurt of another human being that it feels like someone is chewing on our coat, feels that ache within us. 10 years ago, I came across a story of Jorge Munoz, an immigrant from Colombia living in New York City. 5 years before I actually read that story, Jorge had started preparing meals in his kitchen for those who were hungry on the street. Earning $600 a week as a bus driver, didn't leave a lot of extra money to do this, so he went to restaurants, went to grocery stores, and collected the food that they were going to throw out, the food that was still good. And he'd take it back to his little apartment, and with the help of his mother, they would prepare meals, sometimes meals for as many as 100 people that he would take out late in the evening to those who were living on the street. In those first 5 years that he did it, it is estimated that he served 70,000 people. As the years have gone on, those he initially helped, who have since gotten a job and found housing, now help Jorge in this work, either cooking in his apartment or delivering the meals or collecting food that others would be throwing away. When asked why he started it in the first place, Jorge described a discomfort that he felt in seeing the suffering of others. But then he added that the Lord gave him a way of acting, of directing, if you will, that discomfort towards something good. I think that discomfort that he describes there is the splunchnidzomai, the gnawing on the intestines. Here's the thing, when we feel compassion for another, and I'm not talking about pity, that's powerless. I'm talking about the true compassion for another. We can't sit idly by. Pity is passive and apathetic. Compassion, it's powerful. Newton's third law of motion says for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. When the hurt of someone else hits us like a sucker punch, there is a reaction that occurs, yet compassion, splunchnidzomai, allows for God to be a part of the equation, and suddenly the reaction is not limited to an equal or opposite reaction. The reaction, in fact, can be greater in its capacity for creativity and resourcefulness, greater in its capacity to actually bring about change. Compassion has power. Now, it's an unpopular power because compassion rarely produces anything of substance for the person who is moved with compassion. In fact, it almost always demands something of the person who has been moved with compassion. Pity requires nothing. Compassion demands something of us. In Philippians 2, what scholars believe to be one of the great hymns of the early church, the Apostle Paul offers this, and I'm intrigued by the way the King James Version translates the first verse. It says this: "If there be any consolation in Christ, if any comfort in love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any bowels of mercy." Bowels of mercy? They didn't know how to translate the Greek, I think, here. It's that gut-wrenching compassion that one feels for another. But the larger passage, I think, suggests what we should do. It goes on to say that we should have the mindset of Christ, who did not accept equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself. Jesus didn't sit in heaven and just simply have pity for folks from a distance, but he emptied himself and took on the form of a servant, becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. God acted in Jesus, demonstrating compassion. Thank God. Seriously, I thank God that heaven isn't the home of a pity party. Pity provides an easy escape route long before one actually reaches the cross. It requires nothing. There's no obligation or commitment, and it would have left the world unchanged. Compassion, though. Compassion gave way to the emptying of self, the giving away of oneself for the sake of another, and it changed the world. That's power. That's power. When I first moved to Kansas City in the early 90s, I had a chance meeting with a guy by the name of John Swamley. I knew that he was a retired ethics professor, but I knew nothing else of that very humble, unassuming man. I didn't know that I was sitting next to a rock star, at least a rock star in some circles. John Swamley in the 1950s had been the chairperson of FOR, the Fellowship of Reconciliation. In 1956, he met with a small group called the Southside Strategy Group. There was a handful of people there, maybe some names you know, Dr. Martin Luther King, Ralph Abernathy. It was the forerunner of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And throughout the 50s and 60s and 1970s, John Swamley seemed to be present at every key moment in this nation's history when there was something powerful happening in changing lives, in changing communities, in changing our culture. I bring up John Swamley because about a year after I met him, and when that day when I met him, again, I didn't know who this guy was. I later, when people said, "You do know who you were sitting next to, don't you?" I went and did some research, went to the library, checked out his book, read some articles. Well, about a year after I met him, he spoke at a dinner. He was the keynote speaker for a fundraiser for scholarships. And in that speech, which I asked for a copy of it, John Swamley said, "I believe Jesus doesn't sleep much at night." I think they're all kind of curious where he was going with that thought. But he explained. He says, "Jesus keeps on waking me up about 1, 2 in the morning. Actually, he's been doing it for a long time now. Not so that I can worry about frivolous stuff that I can't control. He wakes me up with a knot in my stomach and an image in my head of a person or a group of people or a situation where there's injury or suffering or sadness or grief. And I always say the same thing to Jesus. 'What do you want me to do about it?' And Jesus responds the same every time. 'I'm not expecting you to do anything by yourself. I'm just hoping you will join me in the work,' Jesus says. But I say to Jesus, 'It looks like a lot of work.' And Jesus is always honest with me. Yes, there's going to be a lot of work. As we ate our desserts around those tables, listening to him speak, John Swamley said, 'I hope Jesus wakes you up tonight in the middle of the night, because there's a lot of need out there.'" John Swamley knew very well that there is power in compassion, in that spirit-induced ache that we feel deep within us when we look upon the suffering of another. There is power because of the one who knots our stomachs, who is chewing on our entrails, who is trying to get our attention, not just to look, but to act. The first month after Donna, Zach, and I moved to Spring, Texas, I was driving out of my neighborhood when I saw a lemonade stand in the front yard of one of our neighbors. I didn't want to just be a good neighbor and stop, but I stopped for a second reason. The sign that said raising money for the hungry. I had no cash on me, didn't figure they took credit cards, but I had a cup holder of change. And so I reached in, quarters, nickels, dimes, and pennies, maybe a couple dollars worth, and carried it out to the lemonade stand. I poured it in the bucket, and they gave me what, in fact, was a very good glass of lemonade. Started talking with the mother who was helping her 2 children. She said that about a month earlier, her family had been downtown Houston, and the kids had had their first run-in with a person who was in need. And she said her kids couldn't let go of it. Not only in the drive home, but every single day that followed, they kept on asking me, she said, what can we do? We need to do something, Mom. This needs to change. We need to do something. She hoped that in time they'd forget about it, but they didn't. And so they made a lemonade stand, and they were raising money to give, and she said, if you're new to town, you know this place called NAM, Northwest Assistance Ministry? And I said, well, yeah, because the church I work at actually kind of started that program. The kids couldn't just let it go. There was something eating at them because they knew it was wrong, and they felt compassion, not pity. Pity could have let them walk away an hour later, and it could have been gone from their minds. No, they felt compassion, something that was chewing on their entrails to the point that they needed to act, and they did. Compassion has power. It demands something of us. And the one that is doing, I think, the demanding behind it all is the one who gave everything as he felt compassion for us. Not only because we needed it, but in doing so, he set an example for us. That example to be compassionate, not just to feel pity. The world is filled with pity parties. What God wants us to do is be a community of compassion. Because where there is compassion, true compassion, the compassion that Jesus felt deep within himself, that was gnawing on him, is the compassion that changes lives, changes communities, and changes the world. You join me in prayer. Oh, holy God, you not only felt compassion, but acted on our behalf because of that compassion. The Lord of heaven, you did not accept the comfort of heaven, but in Christ Jesus you emptied yourself, serving the world. You gave fully of yourself, and in that act there was power to change lives, to change communities, to change the world around us. Let us move beyond pity. Let us take hold of the compassion that we feel deep within us. Let us be moved by that compassion to act on behalf of sisters and brothers. The compassion that has power, that pushes back in a way that is so much more powerful and resourceful and creative in its ways of bringing about change. Compassion is never caught up in a spirit of hopelessness, but continues to search for ways of acting and reacting, changes of bringing about change in ways that is responsive to the needs of human beings. May the pain that we see in our sisters and brothers, where there's grief and heartache and a sense of hopelessness, let us feel that gnawing within our stomachs that refuses to allow for the present to be the future. Call to us, acting within us, O Lord, so that we can be a part of the change that you are already implementing. Call upon us to be your compassionate community in this part of the world for the sake of our sisters and brothers around us. We make this request in the name of Jesus, the one who emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant, simply because he had compassion for us. We offer our words because of him, and then we continue our prayer with the words he taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and power, and glory forever. Amen.
When we assemble here to worship God, to sing His praises and to hear His word, we will walk softly. Purity of heart and with clean hands, our souls are free. We're free from Satan's hands. We will walk softly. But we are passing through the sacred door into the vault where Christ has gone before. We will walk We'll worship and bow down, we will rejoice, and when we hear the shepherd's gentle voice, we will walk softly,
As I think about the Last Supper that Jesus had with his disciples before his arrest and crucifixion, I think about Jesus sitting around that table, thinking back to his ministry with that group, and the times where Jesus must have just shaken his head when he would teach and they would be concerned about the irrelevant. How they would find themselves going down a path that is in the opposite direction that Jesus was trying to lead them. And when Jesus knew around that table there were those who would run away, those that would betray him. And had Jesus just had pity for them, he would have been out the door. But he felt compassion for them. In their confusion, in their lostness, in their fear, he felt compassion. And that compassion kept him present to them, allowed for him to remain connected to them, working on their behalf, no matter what the future might hold. He was willing to continue to empty himself, taking on the form of a servant as he wrapped a towel around him and knelt and washed their feet, those that would betray him and turn away from him. He had compassion for each and every one of them. In the same way that I believe Jesus has compassion for us. Whatever it is that we might be facing or dealing with or struggling with, Jesus has compassion, not just some pity party in the heavenly places that thinks, oh, that's really bad, but compassion that has to act. And in that example, I think we feel a calling to be compassionate as well toward one another. To feel that ache that I think only the Spirit can bring, that gnawing deep within us that cannot sit idly by but must react. And when we do, and God is a part of the equation, that reaction is often greater than the initial action, because God is bringing creativity and resourcefulness that can begin to change the situation. As we come to the table this morning, as we all gather around and participate in this meal, let us be reminded of the compassion that Jesus showed years ago and the compassion that he continues to demonstrate this moment for each of us. May it be a blessing to us. May it be our inspiration for our own living. Let us now prepare for a time at this table.
Compassion is a good word. It's a profound spiritual concept. What I heard today is that compassion is life-changing action. Now it is time to prepare our hearts and minds to reverence the one who lived and moved and had his being in the compassion of God. Let us pray.
God of all power, may this bread and cup we receive today fill us with love as you love. Make us more compassionate in our daily lives. Use us as a vessel of empathy and understanding to a world in need. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
The scriptures tell us on the night which Jesus was betrayed, he was in the company of his disciples at a meal. And he broke the bread and gave it to them, saying, "Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Likewise, he took the cup, having blessed it, he again distributed it to his disciples. "This is my blood, this is my life, which is shed for all. Do this in remembrance of me." All has been prepared. The table is ready. Come to the table.
this morning and use them in the service of your will. Renew our hearts, give us compassion, and strengthen our purpose in serving as part of your kingdom on earth. We ask in the name of Jesus Christ, your Son.
I see compassion so often within this community. I see acts of compassion, sometimes quietly, one-on-one, here or there. I go to a hospital and I find out that, thinking I'm the pastor, I'm the first one getting there, and find out I'm fourth or fifth in line. People from the church have already been there and gone. So many good acts of compassion. People who felt a nodding up in their stomach, the Spirit saying, let's go. Let's go do something. Let's make a difference. And people not just allowing themselves to sit around with that knot in their stomach, but acting because of it. I give thanks for the way this church demonstrates the compassion that they have seen in Jesus Christ. Cypress Creek Christian Church is a community that continues to invite people to come and be a part of the good work that is happening in and through this congregation. Today, we extend that invitation again to anyone here who would like to make this their church home, anyone who would like to say, I'd like to make Jesus Christ the central part of my life. You can either come forward as we are singing our hymn of discipleship, or you can meet with one of our elders or pastors immediately after the service. Let us now join our voices in this hymn. If you know somebody that might be a blessing to, let them know. I also want to lift up, of course, the chili cook-off. Come be supportive, raise money for mission ministry. Somebody put on the Facebook page, I love it, they said, what, you're telling me that I can raise some money for mission and eat chili? I'm there. So I like that kind of enthusiasm. And then on a more serious note, I just want to lift up our brothers and sisters in the Methodist Church. They are at a very critical moment in the life of their tradition. They're having their national gathering right now, making some tough decisions. A good friend of mine, Mark, is the spokesperson of what they call the One Church movement, trying to hold the tradition together over some tense issues. And what will come out of this, People are talking about a split 2, 3, 4 different ways within the Methodist Church. But trying to find a way of holding it together. And I like it because the one church movement, I wouldn't say this to too many folks, makes them look a lot like the disciples. But I think that could be a good thing. But I say in all seriousness, be in prayer for them, because I know it is really weighing heavy upon a lot of folks within that tradition. I invite you now to take the hand of somebody close. Let us join together our closing prayer. Gracious God, may your love and our love